Hello. Today I'm going to show you how you can see basic e-commerce data in Google Analytics 4. So whether you've connected Google Analytics 4 with our slide rule analytics Shopify GA4 app, or whether you have connected using the built-in Shopify integration, or you're using Google Tag Manager or any other integration, it's all going to work the same with this reporting interface. So the first thing to note is that you are not going to see data. You're never going to see today's data in Google Analytics 4. That's a little bit different than Universal Analytics. If you were used to Universal Analytics, you're used to being able to come in here and click today's date and see, everything except the last hour of data. You can see here in Google Analytics 4, it takes 24 hours to process data. So you're never going to see today's data. In fact, yesterday's data is only going to be accurate, if it's been longer than 24 hours. So it's 8 a.m. today. There might be no data in here for yesterday. There might be some. The processing times do vary a little bit, right? But you really can't trust the data if it's less than 24 hours old. So with that being said, if you're testing an integration such as ours or any others, you're not going to see much today, right? It's going to take a while. So the best thing to do is to go check out the real-time report, right? Now, the real-time report shows users from the last 30 minutes. This is a demo store, so there's no data. But if I were to go to my store here and enter, the data will come up. Now you can see it's not quite real time. It does take a little bit, right? That's okay. All right. But let's dig into, so you can use the real-time report to debug, right? You'll see events fire over here. So you can see there's me in Conroe, Texas today. You can see the page view event and the session start event started, right? Good. Cool. And then as I go through events here and I look at things, those events will show up and populate over here, right? So there was a page view, right? There was a view item. I can do add to cart. Those things will show up, almost in real time as I go through here. If you click on an event, it'll show you some details about the event, all the stuff that we have on the user, all the parameters and everything that we're sending over. So we can look at this view item, right? And we can see, okay, here's all the stuff that's being sent, right? It doesn't include in the real-time report, it doesn't include the items. Those items are being tracked. They're just not displayed in the real-time report. Okay, good. Other things to note, if you are using the slide rule analytics implementation, right, you won't see those events in a debugger. If you're using some sort of a debugger here, you'll see the client-side events we fire. So that's everything through add to cart. But once you get to the checkout, if I were to begin checkout, I'm not going to see client-side events for this. That is because those events fire server-side. Same with the purchase event. So just keep that in mind. The purchase event in slide rule analytics is also delayed by 5 minutes to account for upsells. So you won't see the purchase event in the real-time report until at least 5 minutes after you make the purchase. Just keep that in mind. Okay, cool. So real-time report really only useful for debugging here. There's no reason to be looking at your real-time report like on a regular basis. It would just be like if you just installed our app or just set up the built-in Shopify integration, then maybe you'd use the real-time report to debug it and make sure that it was working as expected. What you're mostly going to spend your time in is the reporting over here. And Google Analytics 4 has two ways to report data. There's the built-in reporting, which is under reports, and you can see that there's some built-in reporting here, pre-built stuff for Google Analytics 4. Most of the stuff that we're going to be interested in is going to be under monetization. I will tell you that the built-in reporting from Google Analytics 4 is light, especially if you're used to Universal Analytics, which had a lot of reports built out and everything. So I'll show this to you. This is the main report. I don't find the monetization overview particularly interesting, but it will give you a total revenue number. Like I said, this is a demo store, so we'll have to go back in time to pick up some more data, right? But you'll see it'll show you total revenue, things like that. Good. There's a couple of things here that can be misleading, right? One, this is total purchasers, not total purchases. So if you have a lot of repeat purchases, it will not work. Okay. The other thing is Google Google has updated some of these reports occasionally, and you can see here that this is a built-in report, and it has an incompatible request, right? That's because the Google engineers didn't know what they were doing, and they put average purchase revenue per user by item name. That is not a valid combination of metrics and dimensions. They're trying to look at user revenue, purchase revenue by item name. You can correct that, but it's not really worth looking at. And if you don't have any order coupons, you won't see any of that here either. Let's go take a look at e-commerce purchases because a lot of you are going to end up here. They put this chart that I think looks cool but isn't very helpful that shows you item viewed and item added to cart by item name. Maybe some people find that useful. That's great. But it doesn't tell me a lot. It doesn't seem very informative. But this table down here really shows the e-commerce events that are firing. You can see I've got items viewed, right? I've got items added to cart, items purchased, and items revenue. So that will show you the total revenue by item. Okay, that's nice. Really, most of the time what we care about is just total purchases. That's like the top line number that we want to look at. So where is that in here? Well, it's not in the built-in reporting. Don't know why. Seems like that would be the thing that they would put up front and center, but they didn't do it. So uh, let's build an exploration to look at that. Exploration is custom reporting, and I will say, well, the built-in reporting for Google Analytics 4 is very underpowered compared to Universal Analytics. The custom reporting interface in GA4 is very powerful, so is much better than Universal Analytics. So I do recommend that this is just where you should spend most of your time in Google Analytics, is building out explorations. I always like to start with a blank exploration, and we're just going to create one really quickly that shows us what we're interested in. I start with a table. There are other techniques and things that you can use here that are fancy, but I always like to just start with a table because that just really shows me what the data is, right? Before I start to explore it at all. So the way that this works is over here on the left, you have a palette, and over here, this is your canvas. So before I can do anything on the canvas and build a report, I need to import the dimensions and metrics that I'm interested in into my palette. So the way that I do that is I hit the plus sign here. Now, what we're going to be interested in, I'm going to show you a couple of different things. The first one is date. Right, I'm going to import that. And then the other one is transaction ID, because that's a good way to see which transactions are coming in and things like that. All right. So we're just going to create a very simple report here. Good. So I've got date and transaction ID. I just imported those dimensions into my canvas. And now I'm going to import the e-commerce metrics that I'm interested in. Again, we're going to keep it really simple here. You'll see here that there's a couple of different things that are shown here under e-commerce, right? There's purchases and purchase revenue and e-commerce purchases. For Shopify stores, these are exactly the same thing. E-commerce purchases and purchases are the same thing. It doesn't matter. I think this sounds better, so I just click those two and I stick with that. And I don't worry about the e-commerce purchases and e-commerce revenue, but they are the same number. So I'm going to click import. Good. All right. And now I've imported those dimensions and metrics into my canvas or into my palette, and I need to add them to the report into the canvas over here. And the way that I do that is I simply drag and drop. So I can drag and drop date. Let's just keep it simple and just do date on this one. And I will drag and drop purchases and purchase revenue. Cool. And here I start to get a report, right, that shows me purchases and purchase revenue by date. Great, cool. That's the basic report that I need most of the time in Google Analytics to check the validity of the data and also just kind of see what's going on with my store. Now you see that this is sorted by total number of purchases. That's not usually what we want to do with a table like this. So if you click, it doesn't look like you can click date, but if you click like just next to the date, just to the left of date, you can sort by date. This is obviously ascending. I'll sort descending, so the most recent date first. And then you can see that it sorts it by date here. And I can go down. Now, this is a demo store, so that's why, there's not a lot of data here, but this data is still accurate, right? And cool. Good. One thing on this report is you'll see that Google Analytics won't let you select today. Today's May 5th that I'm creating this video. So in the explorations, it won't let you select today wisely because there's never any data for today. I would just add that you also need to be cautious about yesterday's data. So if yesterday's data looks underreported, but every other day looks good, it's just because Google Analytics hasn't processed the data from yesterday. Like I said, it takes 24 hours. Okay, cool. Other things here, you'll see the number of rows that it shows here. I've got it set to 10. I've also got my date range over here. So I could select the date range that makes more sense for this reporting. I could select, for instance, the 24th through the 27th. I could hit apply and it'll update over here. Good. All right, cool. Good, good, good. Nice. I can also select more rows. There's no more rows here, but if I did the last, the last 30 days, something like that, right? And I did show rows, I could show up to 50 dates like this, and I could go back like that, right? Good. Okay, cool. You can also export this data. You can export it to Google Sheets. Now, one of the downsides of the exploration reports is they only go back, as you can see, a couple of months, right? So they go back 2 months actually. So it's May 5th today, and I can go back to March 5th. I don't know. I hope Google Analytics, that they update that limit at some point because the built-in reporting is very limited. That's just a limitation of Google Analytics. Hopefully they update that at some point. One other thing I wanted to show you is you do have different options for visualizations. So this feels maybe a little, stilted as a table. So I'm going to get rid of the date dimension and I'm going to select the line chart. The line chart by default will do it by date. So you can see it like this, right? Like I said, demo data, not very interesting, but this does give you a sense for what's going on here, right? So pretty cool. One other thing is if we wanted to build a report, say by transaction IDs instead of date, I could drop that over here and just drag that dimension down. And you can see I've got the actual transaction IDs or order IDs from Shopify, right? That would be if I went to my slide roll analytics admin account here, and I went and I looked at an order. The transaction ID is this guy, right? That is the transaction ID. You could take one of these transaction IDs and you could paste it over the order and it'll pull up the actual order in Shopify, right? So that's pretty cool. That's why we use transaction IDs or order IDs, I should say, as the Google Analytics for transaction ID instead of order numbers. Just makes it easier to find. That's if you're using the slide roll analytics integration. If you're using the Shopify built-in integration, it's going to have the order number. Totally fine. Doesn't make a difference, right? Okay, cool. All right. One other thing on the custom explorations here is you're going to want to add filters sometimes, right? So you can add filters down here. Like if I were creating this report, I don't want to see this not set. I don't really know why Google puts it in there, but they do. It's not a big deal. I can just go, hey, give me transaction ID does not exactly match, not set, like so, and I click apply, and there you go, it's gone. That's how filters work. You can add segments. That's kind of an advanced topic. We'll maybe cover that in a different video. You can share these explorations here. You can share with others. If you click share like that, anybody who has access to your property will have access to this report. If you do so, of course, you're going to want to name the exploration. So transaction IDs maybe might be a nice name for this, or e-commerce checks. Cool, great. Hope this video is helpful. Definitely reach out if you have any questions. Try the Slide Roll Analytics app if you're seeing some data discrepancies with your current integration between Shopify and Google Analytics 4. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.